Get going in just a couple of minutes. Just saying hello. Professor Yossi Leshem is with us tonight. I'm sure everybody's here to see and hear what Yossi has to say. I know I am. Very, very interesting. Wait, we can't hear, nobody's. Mary, I hope you can hear us now. Just had begun at this moment. Going to get going in just a minute. Welcome everybody from all over. If you want to start saying hello in the chat, telling us where you're tuning in from, we'd appreciate it. I'm Jay Shofet, Director of Partnerships and Development for SPNI, coming to you from Tel Aviv. I believe Yossi, Professor Dr. Leshem is coming out from his home in Har Gilo.
Yeah, sure. Good evening.
Okay.
To be with you.
Beautiful spring day here in Israel. Avi Sadiv is backing us up here from Toronto. Avi is the Executive Director of Canadian Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel, our affiliate in Canada. Thank you very much, Avi, for great back office as usual. Chat is disabled, we are told. Avi?
I enabled it now. Can somebody please try?
Great. Yeah, so write us your comments in the chats, but you can write questions in the question and answer feature, and Yossi will present for about 40 or 45 minutes, and then we'll take questions at the end. But if there's anything, that's you can't hear us or something urgent, let us know as well, either in the chat or the questions. But thank you all. Great. Everybody who's writing in the question and answer where they're from, please write in the chat feature. Cool. Oh, hello, Miroslav. Probably our most consistent webinar attendee from Serbia. Yossi, you have regards from Bob and Meredith Magnus.
Ah, wow, they are hearing us. Great.
They're hearing you. Yeah, you can open up the chat feature, Yossi, before you get on and see what we're doing. I think we'll get going. People are joining us at a regular rate. We're up to 150 people already.
And we're live on Facebook as well.
And we're live on Facebook. I don't know how many people are there yet, but thank you, everyone. Colin from the UK. Yeah, it's actually not our anniversary. We planned this with Yossi, I think, a few weeks earlier. We've actually been doing these webinars since early April, I guess just 2 weeks. I think early April was our first one. We got going right after Corona started, and thrilled to have with us tonight, or today, this morning, depending on where you're listening to us, Professor Yossi Leshem, a former CEO of SPNI, senior lecturer, professor emeritus of the Tel Aviv University, professor of zoology, a world-renowned ornithologist who has been a historic figure in Israel in nature conservation and in fact helping the Air Force and civilian flyways be free of birds. Yossi might talk about that tonight. He's a fascinating lecturer. We always enjoy every opportunity we have to hear Yossi English, Hebrew, or whatever he speaks. He's a great guy. And Yossi runs the Hupu Foundation, Karen Duchifat, which has been supporting both the work of SPNI's birders and birding conservation in Israel and throughout the Middle East. You'll hear about Yossi's work with our Palestinian and Jordanian neighbors on biological pest control in the Jordan Valley and all kinds of cooperative ventures that Yossi has undertaken. Yossi's the kind of guy who, when he's not like hobnobbing with popes and presidents and prime ministers, he's flying in gliders alongside birds, tracing their migration routes and advancing science. And he's also advances citizen science and education. Yossi's involved in hundreds of school projects in Israel and with and with our Arab neighbors. He's great with the kids. He's written a very popular children's book about the barn owl, and there's a lot more to say about Yossi, but we'll turn it over to him. And thank again Avi in Canada and all of our supporters from around the world, especially our board members, dedicated volunteer lay leaders in the United States and in Canada and in the UK and in France. Thank you all very much. Great to see everybody here tonight. We're up to about 180 people, Yossi. So we'll take it away, and we'll get back to questions and answers in 40, 45 minutes or so. Thank you very much. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Jay, for introducing me. It's really a great pleasure to be tonight or this lunchtime or morning with all of you and tell you some of our activities of the Society for the Protection of Nature in cooperation with Tel Aviv University. I just learned that we have with us General Bob Magnus and his lovely wife. He is a 4-star general, a retired one, Jewish, and I was very much delighted to be his friend and meet him here. He's the chairman of Elbit in the United States. And why I'm introducing him too, because I'm showing you now, you can't see it, you can't see it. Can you see?
The background is weird.
Because of the background. Anyway, this morning, the magazine of the Israeli Air Force came out. This magazine was published since 1948. And for the first time ever, the cover of the magazine is with birds. And they are telling our story of joining forces between the Israeli Air Force, the SPNI, and Tel Aviv University. So I hope you can see the first slide, which I did.
We're good. Yep, we see it, Yossi. Now you're frozen.
Decided to be open with it. You can see here in 1982, and unfortunately, as you can see here, we lost. It was the last pair, which was nesting near the first World Heritage Site in Israel, Masada, that I believe every one of you have heard about or visited. And on the back side, you can see the Dead Sea. And why did I decide to start with the bearded vulture? Because our 9th president, Mr. Shimon Peres, when he came to Palestine in the last century, in 1944, he was leading a delegation to investigate new roads in the Negev desert. At that time, we have been a British mandate, and there was not the Israelis to go wherever they want. So the cover story was the professor who stands right to President Peres, Professor Heinrich Mendelssohn. He was a zoologist. And on the right side, you can see the face of the late Azaria Alon, who established the SPNI. And Professor Mendelssohn was the cover story for a zoological expedition. When Mr. Peres made Aliyah to Israel from Poland, his name was Shimon Persky. And while they were going in the desert, suddenly the bearded vulture, this is a huge raptor with a wingspan of 3 meters, flew low over the head, and the professor, we saw for the first time this fantastic raptor flying low over the head, started to shout, Peres, Peres, because the Hebrew name of the bearded vulture is Peres. And Shimon Persky was looking for a Jewish name at that time, and on spot, he told everyone, okay, I'm changing right now my name from Shimon Persky to Shimon Peres. And later on, I'll show you, he was a big supporter of us. Here you can see Mr. Peres in 1944 sitting on the expedition on a camel in the desert. In 2008, on the 60th Israel anniversary events, there were 12 Israelis who were awarded the prestige prize from the Israeli government for their contribution to the environment and conservation in Israel.
Yossi, you're frozen.
It was fully crowded, and I was already committed to be at the same time of the ceremony in the United States with the SPNI to give set of lectures in the United States. So I told the Minister of Environment, I apologize, but I am already committed. I cannot be in the ceremony. So Mr. Perez called me and he told me, Yossi, what are you doing? This is a ceremony you cannot escape. So I told Mr. Perez, I will send my grandson, Nadav, who was at that time 9 years old, and he will come with a T-shirt of our national bird of the hoopoe. So when my grandson came instead of me to get the prize on the stage, my wife and his mother were really stressed that he will get in a problem with before 3,000 people. But when he came up to the stage to Mr. Perez kissed him and told my grandson, "You are much, much nicer than your grandfather." So what I wanted to tell you today is the story. As you know, Israel is a small country in a junction of 3 continents. From the political point of view, as you know well, we are all the time in the news, all the time tension, right? In the last few days again, big conflicts between Palestinians and Israelis. And from this point of view, we are in a junction which is very complicated. But talking on bird migration, we are in Israel and in the Middle East, one of the hotspots in the world. And for my studies with the Israeli Air Force, we know now that about 500 million birds are migrating over Israel twice a year. So 1 billion birds are moving over our limited skies, which is, of course, a fantastic event. More than that, because we are in a junction of 3 continents, the biodiversity is really special for Israel. Here, for example, you can see a female of desert owl, which are breeding in the desert in Israel. They are on a very limited space, nesting only in the desert, in the Judean desert near the Dead Sea, in the Negev, in Sinai, and in Jordan. So in the desert of Jordan. So for bird lovers, this is one of the birds that everyone wants to see. In Israel, we have more than 100 pairs of them. So for us, the diversity is, of course, so special because we have species from Africa, from Europe, and from Asia, which are nesting in a junction of 3 continents. Also, the weather in Israel is so good that you have most of the day sunny days. So if you are a bird lover, of course, you can enjoy the birds, like the birders here in Eilat. If you come with your wife or your husband who are not really interested in birds, they enjoy the sun. And this Israel is indeed an excellent hotspot for bird lovers to come and enjoy it. Just to show you how special is Israel, I want to show you the number of plants which we have in Israel is 2,600 species. If you divide the number of plants to the size of Israel, 23,500 square kilometers, we have 90 species per 1,000 square kilometers. In California, only 36. In Italy, 18. Because again, we are in junction of 3 continents. Same story with the birds. We have 540 different species of birds in Israel, and per 1,000 square kilometers, 46 species. In Britain, only 38. Even Britain is 20 times bigger than us. So the Economist published a paper that over the world, there are now over 100 million bird lovers. So principally, we should have in Israel tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands bird lovers coming to see this. Unfortunately, we have only, not in the year of the COVID-19, but before, we have about 50,000 bird lovers who are coming to Israel. Why are they not coming on big numbers? The answer is very simple. If you look at how many tanks we have in 1,000 square kilometers, Israel is also leading, 152, comparing to 7.7 in the United States. So this is the political situation, which is very complicated here, if you are bird lovers. And the question is, what is our vision? I always like to show him in 1991 with the binocular bird lover.
Yossi,
yes.
You keep freezing. I don't know if Avi's hearing that as well. It's about the 3rd time you've frozen.
I froze from time to time.
It's okay. No, I'm okay. Is it okay now?
Now it's fine, yeah.
Okay, so you can see President Bush with the binocular, but he forgot to remove the cover of the binocular. And here again, you can see our Minister of Defense, which happened to him the same in another maneuver in Israel. So the question is, which way do we want to choose? Do we want to see this like what happens now near the Damascus Gate in the old city of Jerusalem, or what the SPNI is doing? We are trying to use the bird as a platform between the Arabs and the Jews, and I see the birds under the title of this presentation, Birds Know No Boundaries, the birds doesn't belong to the Arabs or the Jews. They are migrating over Israel, and that we are trying to do. For example, you can see in Israel the lesser spotted eagle, which are just flying now on the peak migration over Israel. 120,000 eagles are migrating over Israel. The entire world population are flying in 2 weeks over Israel. So they are using the thermals and moving over our country. So for bird lovers, the entire world population of the eagles are in Eastern Europe. So here in one morning, you can see 5 to 10,000 eagles. More than that, if you are a citizen of the United States or of Canada, you can see only 2 species of eagles in United States and Canada. You can see the bald eagle, which is the national symbol of the United States, or you can see golden eagles. In Israel, you can see 12 different species of eagles. So if you are an eagle lover, come to Israel. About 85% of the world population of white storks are migrating over Israel. Pelicans, all the Palearctic population, all the pelicans of Europe and Western Asia, about 60,000 of them are migrating over Israel. In the past, before the 1950s, all of them were stopping in the Hula Valley in the northern part of Israel, and they were using one-day stop they can 5 days migrate with no food. But then they continue to Africa, to South Sudan. Unfortunately, at the early 50s of this was one of the Zionist big projects, but this was the most important wetland for migrating birds. This was not only a problem in Israel, that a wetland of 15,000 acres were dried out. Wetlands in Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, and Lebanon was also dried out. So all these migrating birds from Asia and Europe to Africa suffered from severe problems to have a wetland point. Now, what happened, for example, is the pelicans, after the Hula Valley was dried out, they moved, of course, to another source of food, to the fish ponds of the farmers of the kibbutzim. And of course, for a farmer who is raising fish, this was a problem. And a student from Haifa University found out that a pelican needs every 5 days to feed on 1,200 grams of fish. So all the pelicans were coming to the fish ponds and causing big problems to the farmers. So what the SPNI, together with the National Park Authority, did, since the last decade, we are feeding in the autumn in big water reservoir on the coast. We are getting food. We are buying from the farmers about 120-ton fish, and we are feeding the pelicans. And the pelicans learn very fast that they have a free lunch in this water reservoir, as you will see soon. And very fast, the birds learn, the pelicans, they can get free lunch without paying, of course. And here you can see the pelicans, when they see the car coming, on the right side of the picture, you can see the car, and they bring every time 8 tons of fish, and the pelicans can feed. On the ear you can see the fish, and the pelicans are coming to have their lunch, and then they go to southern Sudan. So we are using these places now to invite the public to enjoy when we are feeding the pelicans. And this year, more than 100,000 people came to enjoy to learn what they are doing. I'm very keen on birds of prey, and I was hosted by Professor Jan Newton from Scotland, and I went to a big project of the RSPB. RSPB is the Royal Society for Protection of Birds. It's the biggest NGO in the world, 1.1 million members in the RSPB in UK, and they established a hide for a nest of osprey, because the British were stealing the eggs of the ospreys, and they came to nest back after almost a decade. And I was highly impressed how so many people are coming to enjoy the nest of the osprey. So in 1979, I am living in Hargilo, which is a field center of the Society for the Protection of Nature. And in 1979, to my big surprise, on a pine tree, a golden eagle decided to nest very close to Jerusalem. So we organized, like in Scotland, hundreds of volunteers who came to watch the nest, to write all the notes, and to find out that no one is stealing the chicks or the eggs. What we found out was some amazing views. What we learned, that the golden eagle near Jerusalem is feeding on tortoises. They catch the tortoise, who are slow-moving animals. They fly them to a height of about 200 meters and drop the tortoise on a stone. And then when they smash the tortoise, they feed on the tortoise. And in one season, they ate over 120 tortoises. The big story was the nest of the eagles was on a piece of land which belonged to a Christian monastery, which is called Kremizan, near Jerusalem. And in Kremizan, they are producing wine. So the combination of buying a bottle of wine and enjoying a nest of an eagle was a big success, 1979. And on the first year already, we had 35,000 people who were coming to enjoy the nest of the eagle and buy wine. And the monastery priest was so impressed with how many people are coming to see the eagles. So they made a big drawing of an eagle bringing a barrel of red wine, and they wrote in Hebrew, Gam ani tzameh, I'm thirsty too. But they made the painting of a bald eagle of the States. And I asked the priest who made the painting, why did you make the American bald eagle and not our golden eagle? So he told me, Yossi, I know nothing about eagles. I just took the Time magazine, and from an advertising of the Winston cigarette, I copied it for our eagle. So this was, of course, in 1979, 80, 81, they were growing the chicks. But then the new hood was developed in Jerusalem, and they moved to another place. Nowadays, a PhD student, Ron Migater, is studying golden eagles. And it's an Israeli guy who studied them in the Alps. And I wanted to show you now we can put radio transmitters on the golden eagle, and we can follow them every second. Where are they flying? How high are they flying, and what is their velocity? And here you can see a male and a female of golden eagle on the slopes of the Alps, how they are climbing up the thermals using the hot air along the slopes of the Alps, and you can follow them and can learn much better and much more than we learned with our binoculars and telescopes 30 or 40 years ago. And you can see they are top flyers, the golden eagle, flying and looking for food together, the male and the female. We have also now, run by the Israel Ornithological Center and the Hooper Foundation, 6 online cameras, which because of the COVID-19, we had last year in 2020, 13 million hits to our cameras in a nest of a short-tailed eagle, of a long-legged buzzard, eagle owl, barn owls, and griffon vultures. And this is, of course, a big story to get the public and mainly the school children connected to the raptors in the field through the internet. So to sum up, Israel is heaven for bird lovers. And we hope, and that's what we are doing in the SPNI, we are trying to bring more and more people through the SPNI to Israel to enjoy this fantastic phenomena, which is not less important than history and archaeology. I was, on the other hand, if you are a pilot in the Israeli Air Force, the Israeli Air Force, because there are 1 billion migrating birds, the Israeli Air Force lost 11 aircraft, which crashed with birds. 3 pilots were killed, and there were 75 collisions between $1 up to $10 million. Here you can see an F-15, which flew over the Negev desert. One stroke penetrated the left engine, and in 4.5 seconds, the aircraft crashed, and unfortunately both the pilot, Captain Ronen Lev, and Captain Yaron Vivente, the navigator, were killed. Another pilot was killed from a Pelican few years before, and the Israeli Air Force took it for granted. And there are sometimes some unbelievable stories. For example, the mother of pilot, Ronen Lev, gave me a painting that he did on the Independence Day when he was 5 years old of the flag of Israel, of an aircraft you can see on the left side, and a black bird touching the left wing, exactly what happened to him after 19 years. So what I was fortunate enough to do my PhD through the SPNI in Tel Aviv University, a joint research with the Air Force. The idea was to reduce dramatically the number of the collisions. And to do this, what we did, we put bird watchers across the country, from the Mediterranean till the Jordan River. Every kilometer, we have 2 birders with telescope and binoculars, so we could exactly map when all the different species are coming and leaving Israel. I was flying with a motorized glider, 272 days. Every day we took off with our motor. I joined a flock of eagles, storks, or pelicans from the Egyptian border and flew with the same flock for 5 to 9 hours with the same flock from the Egyptian border till the Lebanese or the Syrian border. And here you can see my glider with pelicans, and the pelicans over Mount Carmel till they are landing at the end of the day on the Mediterranean. And we used for the first time ever the UAV, the drones, the unmanned aircraft. And because we did this project for the Air Force, we got it free of charge. And for the first time ever, as far as I know, this was never done before with drones for a positive and a project with migrating birds. And we used also radars for the first time in the Middle East. We got radars from Ben Gurion Airport, and here you can see the coastline of Ben Gurion, of Israel. You can see in the middle Ben Gurion Airport, and you see a line of white storks on the slopes of the mountain on a stretch of 120 miles. And later on in 1991, with the big immigration from Russia, I found the Russian general who brought with him a weather radar, General Dr. Leonid Dinevich, and we converted the weather radar to a bird radar. The Israeli Air Force paid for all the development. We developed an algorithm to make it a radar with so the Israeli Air Force could get online pictures of the migration. And nowadays, the Israeli Air Force has 1 radar in the north, 1 in the center of the country, 1 in the south, and we can follow the bird migration like they're coming from Lebanon. You can see here a flock penetrating Israel, and we follow them. So together with the Air Force, we made bird cloud zone. We made very detailed maps with the height and the routes and the time of the birds, and they stopped to fly there in the bird cloud zones. And since 1984, when we started the new regulation, the number of collisions with the Israeli Air Force dropped down, as you can see, dramatically by 76%, saving the Israeli Air Force $1.5 billion. And this is happening till now. Last month, I became 74, but I'm still doing my army service as volunteering together with the Israeli Air Force. We tried to get also the commander of the Royal Jordanian Air Force, and we made big seminar together with the Turkish, Jordanian, and the contract with them with Elbit last week. And we wanted to develop a network in the Middle East, but because of the political situation, it didn't work till now, but we made it in Europe. And we are now converting 300 radars in Europe from weather radar to bird radar, so people can follow the migration online. And we even used with a guy, Dr. Nick Carter from Florida, who trained border collies to chase birds from airports. So we implemented this system in the Israeli Air Force, and now in every airbase we have a border collie which is chasing the bird, and these birds are very energetic and they are doing a great job. They are getting bored only on Shabbat, on Saturday, because the Israeli Air Force doesn't train on Shabbat, and then they are bored because they do nothing. So you can see here Eliezer Shkedi, one of our former commanders of the Air Force, giving for the first time ever an official bone to a dog, never done before. And this was another way of thinking out of the box, how we succeeded to reduce collisions with the Israeli Air Force. Later on in 1996, we started to use GPS to follow migrating birds. I was privileged to get from Angela Merkel, who was in 1998 the Minister of Environment of Germany. They gave the SPNI and Tel Aviv University 1.5 million euro to follow 120 German storks and follow the migration from Germany through the Middle East till South Africa. And we developed we matched this with money for school children. We developed a big website which you can follow, birds.org.il, and 250 schools started to follow the migration of the German white storks. Later on, the American government, the USAID, gave us another $1.5 million, and we got 30 Palestinian schools and 30 Jordanian schools who were communicating each other under the title of this lecture, Migrating Birds, No Boundaries. We, at that time, succeeded to bring Palestinian, Jordanian, Israeli students to watch birds in Beit Shean Valley, and then at lunch make together lunch. And we gave them Jewish name, Christian name, and Muslim name, the storks. And I want to show you one of the storks, which was called Princess, which moved, you see from our website, from Germany, through the Bosphorus, through Turkey, to Israel, and then to Sudan. And the male, her husband, moved to Spain. She doesn't need a husband all year round. The female Princess was staying every year for 13 years. In 2 months in Sudan along the Nile, and then almost at the same week, year after year, for 13 years, Princess moved to Cape Town, and she was staying on a tree in Cape Town. And we found out, which was amazing, that Princess was navigating from a tree in Germany to a tree in Cape Town, 11,000 kilometers year after year. She doesn't need a Waze. She can do it much better than we are doing. These birds are, in fact, top navigators. And you see the husband already back almost at the same day in the nest, and she flies back to her husband to meet her husband in the nest. So now I wanted to show you a summary of 20 years of my study with the Germans, with Max Planck Institute. And you can see that we followed the storks. All the storks of West Germany are migrating to Africa through the Gibraltar, and the storks of East Germany and Poland over Israel, because over the Mediterranean they don't have thermals, so they avoid to fly over the sea. Every dot is one of our stork with a GPS migrating along the Great Rift Valley till Cape Town. And the storks of West Germany are migrating to West Africa. And everything is online, and school children or students can follow the birds online. And in the spring migration, they make the same route. So this was so exciting. We started cooperate, and we have an excellent cooperation, also the Israeli Ornithological Center, with Professor Fitzpatrick, the head of the bird lab in Cornell University. And now I wanted to show you amazing material from waders which are migrating from Siberia to Australia and New Zealand, and Cornell University is following them. All these birds, every dot again, a bird with a GPS, they fly to the Yellow Sea in China. They stop for 1 week to get some food and get some more fat reserves, and then they fly to Southeast Asia, to Australia and New Zealand, stays there the entire winter, and then they fly back the same route, again stay 1 week in the Yellow Sea in China, and then back to the nesting ground in Siberia. So nowadays, this is a fantastic opportunity to learn much more about bird migration. We put also radio transmitters on griffon vultures, and we had one griffon vulture who is nesting in Jordan. We have feeding station in the Negev desert. He comes every morning to have some kosher meat in Israel and flies back to Jordan. This is another researcher, Ron Efrat, who studied the migration of the pelicans. You can see on the back of the pelican, the radio transmitter. And here you can see how 3 pelicans in a flock of 2,000 are migrating, climbing a thermal near the coastline in Ma'agan Michael. You can see how they are gliding to the next thermal. And that's the way now you can follow birds online in a different level, on a high technology, cutting edge technology. You see that they are gliding now from the thermal, and they are looking, the flock of 2,000, 3 of them with radios for a new thermal. And when they find the hot air, the thermal, they are climbing up, as you will see in a second, to gain height by saving energy. Gliding thermals, instead of wing flapping, is saving energy. And look how now in a second they start to climb. Here they are climbing, and so on and so on. Another project which I want to tell you, which I'm leading now since 1983, we have severe problem in the Middle East with using pesticide against rodents. And people in Jordan, Israel, Syria, Palestinian Authority are using a lot of pesticides against rodents. And unfortunately, many migrating birds, thousands of them were poisoned, and many of our wetland and our soil is poisoned. And of course, if they put the pesticides on alfalfa and then they feed the cow with alfalfa, it comes to the people too by the milk. So we tried to stop the heavy use of pesticides, and we started in Beit Shan Valley in a kibbutz, which is called Sde Eliyahu. We started to erect nesting boxes for barn owls. A pair of barn owls feed on 2,000 to 5,000 rodents per year together with the chicks. So we made them nesting boxes. The barn owls, like the ultra-Orthodox, have between 6 to 12 chicks. And in 1994, as you remember, we signed the peace treaty with Jordan. So with Rabin, Clinton, the late President Hussein, and Ezra Weizmann. On the left side, you can see General Mansour Abu Rashid, who was the head of the intelligence, and General Baruch Spiegel from Israel. And he joined our project, and he got us 300 farmers from Jordan. For the Muslim, the owls are bringing bad luck, and General Mansour Abu Rashid changed their attitude that the owls are bringing good luck. So we have the farmers and Israeli farmers and Palestinian farmers together. You see here Palestinian farmers smiling with the barn owl. We made a lot of posters only in Arabic because of the political situation. And some of the farmers, when they hear about the cooperation with Israel, they don't want to join forces. So many of our stuff is only in Arabic. And the other big issue is not only the story of regional cooperation with the environment and reducing the use of pesticides. We reduced it dramatically by 50%. But you can see here an Israeli farmer together with a Jordanian and Palestinian farmer. And the Israeli farmer proudly provide them from his days in Kibbutz Tirat Tzvi. And as you can see here, a picture I took in November 2017, a seminar in Jordan where all of us together dancing at the end of the seminar. I was also privileged to bring General Mansour Abu Rashid to our parliament, to the Knesset. We made a big event in the Knesset where we gave lectures to the member of the Knesset and several ministers, and we hang in the Knesset an exhibit which was there for 2 months about the Barn Owl project, getting together our neighbors. On the left side is Gilad Erdan, who is now our ambassador in the United States in the UN. On the right side, you can see the Speaker of the Knesset, who is now the President of Israel, Ruby Rivlin, and the general who gave the lecture in the Knesset. And the same, the owls are crossing, they know no boundaries. And you can see here 2 owls on the right side, and an owl, this was taken in a kibbutz near the border. On the right side, an owl from Jordan. On the left side, an Israeli owl. And the biggest story was 5 years ago, when for the first time ever, we found an owl, a male with 2 females, bigamy, never known before in the scientific literature. And this owl, with the 2 females, raised 19 chicks. Can you imagine bringing food for 19 chicks and 1 female? You can see the 2 females on the belly. They have no feathers because when they are brooding the eggs, they lose their feathers. But the male, his belly is not open because he all the time has to bring food. And the owls are vomiting pellets. They cannot digest the bones and the teeth and the nails and the feathers or the hair of the mammals. So with the students, we are opening these pellets, and we have now 540 schools in Israel, including 120 Arab and Bedouin schools. And we have classes where the Bedouins and the Israeli are working together, sitting, analyzing the pellets, building nesting boxes. We showed this event in the World Economic Forum 5 years ago in Davos, together with the general from Jordan. And on the left side is Professor Alexander Rulen, who is a world expert of barn owls. And we succeeded to convince the president of Switzerland to make a big event in Switzerland. My last sabbatical year was in Switzerland, in Lausanne University, because of Professor Rulen. And we came to there, and the president of Switzerland brought 150 ambassadors to show them the project of the Middle East led by the SPNI in Tel Aviv University. And they were highly impressed from the Palestinian, Jordanian, myself on the cooperation. And then the big story was, as you might know, all the soldiers in the Vatican are from Switzerland. So the ambassador from the Vatican, who was also in the group, came to us at the end of the event and told me, Yossi, I was highly impressed. So I told him, together with Professor Rulen and the general, can you get us connected to the Pope? Because we know the Pope Francis is very keen on protecting the globe. So after 1 year, in May 11th, 2019, we were invited to the Vatican to meet the Pope. And this was, of course, very exciting because the Pope wrote a book which is called Laudato Si, Why a Catholic Needs to Protect the World. And we hosted also 2 years ago an astronaut, Ricky Arnold, who stayed in the International Space Station for 195 days. He is also a keen birder, so he gave here a seminar together with the Russian general. And this year, we were supposed in February, the first week, to organize a seminar of 1 week together with astronaut Jessica Meir. She was, her father was in the independence war in Israel. He is an Israeli. He left to Sweden. He married a Swedish lady, and then he moved to the States. And she stayed together with astronaut Christina Koch for 205 days in space. And she did her PhD on diving of penguins. She's also an ornithologist, and she also made a fantastic study how Indian geese can fly 20,000 feet above ground level with almost no oxygen. So she was supposed to come as our guest to give a lecture in the Air Force, to meet our president, and to give lectures to students and to birders. Because of COVID-19, of course, NASA didn't give permit to the astronauts to leave the States. Hopefully in 2022, she will come to Israel. And she was also supposed to give a lecture to all the officers of the Israeli Air Force, all the lady officers, the women, to enforce them that there is future also here. So you see, we met the Pope, and now we are also connected to Cyprus, to Greece, and soon also to the Arab Emirates. The Minister of Agriculture in Cyprus got very excited from our success in the Middle East. And as you know, Israel signed contract with Cyprus and Greece, trilateral contract on security, on gas, and on cyber. And now they are going to also sign with Tel Aviv University, SPNI, and the Ministry of Regional Cooperation on the story of the barnhouse. And another story are the swifts. We have 80 pairs of swift nesting in the Western Wall. And they are nesting, you see, between the stones of the Western Wall. So we made every year a ceremony when the swifts are coming back. This is probably the oldest place in the world where swifts are nesting. So we make a ceremony to bless the coming swifts, and the rabbi of the Western Wall is blessing the swifts. And here you can see a German researcher who developed an algorithm who can freeze the flight of the swift, and you can see 40 seconds above the Western Wall, we have freezed the flight of the swifts. I took him also to the Beit Leshem to take the swifts over the Church of Nativity, because there are also 45 swift nesting there. And he took a picture on the wall of separation between Bethlehem and Israel with the swifts which know no boundaries. So together with the astronaut, a British artist, Mark Koret, made a sculpture of swifts in the Christian quarter of the old city, which is called the Tree of Hope. And I gave the Pope, when I met the Pope, one of the swift from bronze. There are 150 swifts on that one, and the Pope really enjoyed it. And you have to understand, if you get the Pope excited in what we are doing, 1.5 billion Catholic Christian will follow the Pope. And I hope the Pope will help us to go on. Last but not least, I want to tell you about a seminar which we arranged through the SPNI 3 years ago. We brought 24 top artists to the Dead Sea, which is dying out. We stayed 6 days painting in the side of Israel, 6 days in Jordan, and we produced a fantastic album about the dying Dead Sea, which we want with the arts to get it alive. And you can get this album from the ASPNI. And not only that we brought the artists in Jordan, we brought 160 students from Jordan who learned about the problem of the Dead Sea and our activity. Then in the Israeli side, we brought 50 students from Jericho, Palestinians, together with students from Israel. And now we also work with the Israeli army, led by the former commander of the IDF, Major General Eisenkot. And we have a big project which is called, through the Hooper Foundation, the Nature Defense Force. Every commander who does something for the environment gets from us money to do it with the soldiers and to get the soldiers to love the country. And all the generals are coming once a year to one of our projects. We started with one project, and now we have 64 projects. Here you can see the former chief of staff releasing short-toed eagle, and another general releasing a honey buzzard, and all the generals releasing kestrels. We put nesting boxes in the headquarters for swifts with all the board. So I think now the barn owl replaced the peace dove in the Middle East. And I think the bottom line is, if you join forces, you can make it and can succeed much better. And then you can even fish on a highway. But we have to work together. And that is our message. Through the migrating birds and through the activities we bear, we are trying to get people together, but we have to focus on the target. This I took 10 years ago in South Africa. Our public bar presently is not open because it is closed manager. A very simple message from the So I really appreciate your patience hearing my presentation. And I hope very much that you enjoyed it. And I'll be more than happy to answer now questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Yossi. I mean, this has been a unique webinar for us because despite 250 people viewing it, I think people were too fascinated to ask questions. But I have a really important one I want to start with, and we do have a few questions. But I want to start with something. I mean, this is fascinating. I'm sure everybody, the scope of everything you talk about, the topics you touch on, both in terms of nature conservation, global politics, education. I mean, it's very, very wide ranging. But to the heart of what the title of the lecture is, that bird migration knows no boundaries, and the need for, therefore, regional cooperation in environmental issues. Well, you mentioned a lot about stuff we're going to be doing with Greece and Cyprus, and I know everybody's excited about the Abraham Accords and possible cooperation with Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates. But correct me if I'm wrong, but most of what you've talked about in terms of real on-the-ground cooperation with the Jordanians and the Palestinians has declined, if not stopped, in recent years. And if that's so, that's the political climate you kept alluding to, which is out of our control here as environmentalists. But is that your sense? Is that true? I mean, it seems to me that there's fewer meetings of environmentalists in general, not in birding sphere with Palestinians. It's hard for us to find partners for EU projects with our Jordanian neighbors, even with the Egyptians who are other neighbors. So is it all a new Middle East with the UAE, or are the problems closer? More important?
This is not so simple. First of all, as I said, I'm 74 years old. I'm not naive. Peace is done by politicians and not by bird lovers. But I think that the environment and the nature conservation is something which gets easily people together. 1 point. So that's what I'm doing. That's my message. I'm doing it for 5 decades now. And in some success, I think when you are doing this, you have to be a marathon runner and not a sprinter. And we are doing it for many years. Now the situation is, of course, more complicated. And then I'm coming to the third point. With governments of cooperation, things are very bad. But that's the big benefit of organizations like the SPNI. We cannot even cooperate through the universities, because in Jordan, they tell the universities don't cooperate with Israeli universities. But the general, for example, he is the chairman of an organization in Jordan, which is called Amman Center for Peace and Development. He was twice wounded by the Israeli army, but he understood the only chance for the future is trying to do peace process. He's not a bird lover, he's not an ornithologist, but he's pushing for peace. So you have to, for example, just to tell you, 2 years ago in January, we made a big seminar in Jordan, and we invited Arabs from Egypt, Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco. 3 countries couldn't directly cooperate. Even we have a cold peace with Egypt, they cannot directly work with us. But the guy from Morocco, Professor Imad Sharkawi, got very excited from this project, and he agreed to be the contact point for the Maghreb, for North Africa. When the COVID-19 is stopped and he can fly to Israel, immediately I got the funds. He's coming to Israel. He will join our seminars and learn what we are doing in Israel and in Jordan. And then he starts the same project in Morocco. And then not Israel, but he will be our ambassador to do the same with Egypt, Tunisia, and Algeria. So again, I think the story of the bird cooperation is a win-win story. Both sides have a benefit. So again, I'm not naive. It's not easy for the Palestinians to cooperate now. For example, with the SWIFT, it's not a joint venture. The Palestinians are making their own project near the Church of Nativity, and we are doing the Israeli part. In the future, we join again, hopefully, when things will calm down.
Okay, thanks. We have a bunch of questions have shown up, so some quick answers. First of all,
okay.
Are there daily bird migration forecasts in Israel?
Yeah, we have a WhatsApp group that about a lot of birders are just, they see a flock of 40 storks, immediately say 40 storks, over Sde Eliyahu, or 40 stocks over Tel Aviv. And everyone can get this information. And of course, some of the days when we have big numbers, we go immediately to the media, and then everyone, because some of the days you can see a line of 100,000 honey buzzard, for example. Next, in the first week of May, 1 million honey buzzard will be flying from Eilat across Israel to Jordan. So we can inform the public and everyone can hear and enjoy them. And the advantage of Israel is that we are a small country. Wherever you go, you see migration. You don't have to go to special hotspots.
Cool. Somebody asked about satellites. You spoke about the radar and about the GPS. Does the GPS mean that satellites are tracking these birds?
Yeah, exactly. We started with a French satellite, which is called Argos, and you have to pay them for the using of the satellite. And then the satellite goes, for example, Argos goes around the world every 90 minutes. So every 90 minutes by Doppler system, you can get the location with a high accuracy of up to 10 meters. But nowadays, there is many more satellites, so you can get it every second. 1 point. Second point, I didn't talk about it yet, but in Beit Shean Valley, we have Dr. Or Spiegel, who developed a system with Professor Natan in the Hula Valley, where we put 12 antennas, and by triangulation, we can follow, this year we made, with a new PhD student, we followed 35 barn owls, 5 of them crossed to Jordan. Again, they don't care about political borders, and we can follow them every minute. And now, when we found some very new information with the new PhD project in Beit Shean Valley. It's called System.
Fascinating. So here's two big questions, and they're related, I believe.
Yeah.
First of all, in general, are you seeing bird populations in Israel beginning to rise, or are they still on the decline? And two, how does climate change affect what you do?
Okay. First question, some species are forced decline. For example, the raptors, in the past, before the state of Israel was declared, we had about 1,000 griffon vultures. The griffon vulture is for us a heritage. The griffon vulture is mentioned in the Bible 28 times. So from 1,000 pairs in the past, we have now only 45 pairs left.
What is it in Hebrew, Yossi?
Nesher.
The Nesher is griffon vulture, not
Nesher is griffon vulture 28 times in the Bible. It's in the list of the non-kosher birds in the Bible, but never mind. The Nesher, they says 3 ways in the skies. I know 4 are more than the way of the vulture in the sky. People were fascinated how they can soar without moving the wings and so on and so on. The bearded vulture, the pairs in Hebrew, we had pairs and they are gone. We had leopard-faced, many species are gone. But on the other hand, some other species are gaining a much higher number. For example, swifts, which can nest in the towns, or stuff like that, or the jay, or some birds which are related to the oral buildings are on higher numbers. But things are, of course, that's the big story with birds, that all the time it's on changes. The climate change is a big problem, which probably caused reduction of movement, which we can already see also with the small birds, with the passerine, which are coming in lower numbers, because, the birds are coming not just by chance. They are very sensitive to the length of the day. When the day becomes shorter, they start to migrate to Africa and then the same back. And the problem is if they come too early to Europe, if it's a wagtail which eat insect, no insect yet, so they die out. And they are totally dependent on weather and food. So things are changing. In fact, the climate change has no doubt a serious impact also on bird migration over Israel.
Okay. Are your priorities changing because of climate change? Quickly, I got another question or two, and we'll end up. But
yeah, okay. First of all, one thing, because Israel is a small country, we are trying now to change also the the bird, for example, I don't know if people from Toronto are listening to my lecture because I didn't go time to check who already registered. But we have a fantastic group in Toronto, the family of Goldbergs, who are supporting Dan Alon in trying to reestablish deserted fish ponds to new wetlands that can be a good stopover site for birds who are eating wetlands. And the same we are doing now in another place near the coast with Maagan Michael. So I think that if we can give the birds a better biotope to have their stopover and to get their food, the situation will be improved.
Okay, thank you. Wait, somebody else had a question here that I meant to get to it. Oh, yeah, Miroslav asks, is there, when you put up those artificial nests for the barn owls, is there a special way of attracting them to those nests, or do they just show up?
No. The main issue is very simple. The barn owls, the name says they like to nest in barns and in old cisterns, in old buildings. So the system was simple. We started in 1983 with 40 nesting boxes in Kibbutz Eliyahu, as I said, in the Beit Shean Valley. Nowadays, it became led by the SPNI with the Ministry of Agriculture. We have 5,000 nesting boxes. We just put the boxes in the field, and the barn house, if they have the rodents, they are coming to nest there. If there are many, and this is another story, not for today, for another lecture. But the barn house can find out if there is a year with many rodents, they lay 14 eggs. If it's a year with few rodents, they lay only 5 eggs or 4 eggs or don't nest at all. So the 5,000 nesting boxes in agriculture field are doing the job, and all these farmers, hundreds of them, stop to use pesticides because they have the barn house who are doing the job. So as I said, the barn house, who was a bad omen for Muslim, became a symbol of cooperation and a symbol of good luck for the farmers.
Fascinating. Final question, Yossi. Do we feed the pelicans also in the winter, or that's just in the migration? No.
Only migration. They are coming from mainly from the Danube and from Western Asia to Israel. Most of them stay only one night in Israel. They don't migrate at night because they have no thermals. The pelicans are the alternative gliders, and then they move to South Sudan. All of them are staying in South Sudan, where they have a wetland with food, and then in the spring they're just coming. We are just like highway number 6 for the pelicans in Israel. But some of them, they don't have enough food. They stay for 2 or 3 weeks and making damage for the fish ponds. So that's the reason the National Park Authority, together with us and others, are feeding them. And that's the way they will go on to Southern Sudan.
Okay. Now, one final quick question here, where I think our time is up.
Yeah, okay.
But final quick question, and I don't know if this relates specifically to the pelicans or not, but the question is, does it help to put up individual bird feeders in your backyard? I don't think she means for the pelicans, but in general, for nature conservation.
Yeah, sure. I think this really helps more than that. You know, there is a professor who was my partner with studying the stork migration. His name is Professor Peter Berthold. He was the director of Max Planck Institute in Radolfzell, the most famous one in Germany. And he studied blackcaps. This is a small passerine of 8 grams. And what he found out, that the blackcaps learned that instead of going to Africa, in UK, in Britain, this idea of putting in the garden feeders, they have food also in the winter. So all the blackcaps, many blackcaps, instead of going to Africa, they go a shorter way to UK, get their food in the winter, then they come before their friends from Africa, and they are the first one to get the territories. So they have a benefit not only to have food and without wasting a lot of energy, but we're the first one to get the territories in the spring. So he made a study and showed how this is working. So you can help. It's like the peregrine in the United States. Peregrine is the name for the fastest falcon in the world. He can, when he dives on the plane, 400 kilometers per hour. The peregrine were migrating to Argentina, to Chile. But now in all the big towns like New York, Chicago, California, Seattle, they stop to migrate. You know why? Because they have pigeon in the towns. So they have enough food in the winter. They stop to migrate and they enjoy the pigeon from the big towns. Wow. So I think, Jay, I talked enough for 1 hour. Thank you very much for your patience to listen to me. And hopefully the most important thing, when COVID-19 is over, come to Israel and enjoy the bird in Israel. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Yossi. Really appreciate it. I want to mention everybody that this webinar is recorded and it will be online probably by tomorrow at the link on our website at SPNI that Avi put in the chat. It's natureisrael.org/webinars. And it was also we always have a click box in all of the, when we advertise these webinars and when we send you the updates, the one that you saw today, in fact, they always have a click box for all recorded and upcoming webinars. So you can always find them there. You can contact us directly. I want to thank Avi, Sadiv in Toronto, all of our supporters. I want to thank our board members around the world, and especially all of you, 240 people or so on this Zoom, and another couple dozen on Facebook at least, really from all the continents, all over, all the time zones. Yossi, you were amazing as usual. I even learned a couple things. I got a couple questions for you, offline, because it's fascinating, and it's such a treasure to have you when we get back to personal, to actual visits. People will come to Israel to see these birds, and maybe we'll send you to the States to show these birds, people, these things in real life, because you're even better in person. So anyway, thanks everybody. Thanks Avi, and signing off from Tel Aviv and from Har Gilo and from Toronto to all of you. Thanks so much, all of you who've written such nice things in the chats. Really, really appreciate all of it. Thank you.